Whoa, this is so much water. Raining hard. I'm soaked. Wet and cold. Wow, it started raining. It's raining. Oh, it started raining, of course. Okay, started raining. Soaked. I'm tired of the rain. My hands, everything's wet. We're all wet. It feels like it's gonna keep raining. Raining so much! It's been raining, my pants are wet on the legs. It was sideways wind and rain, and I got so cold, but I put on my buff. Drenched. It's gonna be another rainy day. It's freezing and it's raining. Everything's insane. What is life? Well, good morning, everybody. In today's video, I'm going to talk all about rain on the Appalachian Trail. I'm Stella. I hiked the Appalachian Trail this year from February 12th to June 13th. And it was an incredible experience. One of the most intimidating things for me going into the trail was the rain. I've never been one to love hiking in rain. I don't like being wet, and I knew that it was going to be a big challenge for me to overcome when I began the Appalachian Trail. And so even before I started the trail, I really tried to fix my mindset surrounding rain and kind of prepare myself mentally for the challenge it was going to be for me. So in this video, I want to talk to you about my main tips for being in rainy weather on the Appalachian Trail. The most important thing that you want to do is make sure that you're safe. So rain is no joke when you are backpacking and hiking and going into the woods where you might not have cell service. It's not something that you want to take lightly. So before you leave town, before you lose service, check the weather. Check the weather and then check it again. And then when you're on trail, if you have a GPS, a satellite device, a lot of times you can check the weather with those, like my little Garmin Mini InReach can check the weather. So always check the weather and be aware of what you're getting into when you go into the woods. So outdoor elements that you want to consider are the temperature, the grade of the trail, like how steep is it? Are there river crossings? Because if it's been raining, the rivers can swell up and become really dangerous to cross. Maybe there's a bridge that washed out, and you might have to ford that river if the bridge is out, or maybe you won't be able to ford the river if it's too swollen from the rain. How far are you hoping to go? The distance that you travel in the rain is going to be different than the distance that you travel not in the rain a lot of times. And are you traveling with a group? Are you traveling solo? Are you staying in a shelter? Are you tenting? Are you getting picked up by a shuttle and going to a hostel? All these things are important to consider when you're about to travel in the rain and hike in the rain on the Appalachian Trail, because you might not be able to go as far, or maybe you can go a little bit farther to get to a hostel and get picked up and then have a dry night stay. Maybe that's important for you to do so you can make sure you're safe. Maybe the temperature is about to drop unexpectedly and you found out that day, and so it's really important for you to get to town. So there's like all these little micro decisions that you want to be aware of and consider when you're gonna attempt and go out in the rain on the Appalachian Trail. I do think my experience was a little different because I did start in February, which is like still winter. So I didn't have to deal with as much like hot rain as I think most Appalachian Trail through hikers have to deal with. I had to deal with a lot more cold rain and that could be really scary at times. So after you're kind of aware of all of these different elements and what to expect when you're going out into the rain, what might happen, what challenges you might have to overcome, you want to make sure that your gear is up for those challenges. So if it's gonna be cold and rainy, you're gonna need layers and your rain gear, and then warm layers that are dry once you get to your shelter or your tent. I have some of my rain gear here, kind of just like hanging out on the floor, but I pulled out some of my gear from my gear closet to show you. Hopefully I have this, like, I'm kind of hoping to build like a little gear wall that's on a rack so I can kind of move it around, and it'll make making these videos easier. And I'm also hoping to have like a normal place to sit, so I'm not just like in my living room randomly when I'm making these videos. So that was a side note, but okay, let's talk about rain gear now. So I hiked with a Gore-Tex rain jacket by Arc'teryx. I don't think that they make this exact model anymore. I think it's like the Zeta. It's not the super light, but I don't think it was like the all around either. I think it was just a model they had for a couple years and they don't have it anymore. But it's pretty thick, and I'm sure you can kind of get one similar to this. It is 10 ounces, so that's way heavier than most other rain gear, other rain jacket options, but it's really breathable. It feels good on, and I do feel like it takes a really long time for me to completely wet out. Like, I don't know if I actually really, no, I definitely did completely wet out, because there were some like downpours this past season on the Appalachian Trail. But it took a long time, and it takes really, really heavy rain. Otherwise, this jacket really does keep me warm, and keep me dry. So underneath my rain jacket, sun hoodie hiking shirt, warm mid-layer, warmer mid-layer, rain jacket. So all of these for if it's gonna be cold. If it's not gonna be cold, these things are less important, and you can just pick and choose. But in addition to those, you wanna make sure you have gloves. And I liked having waterproof gloves and a glove like liner that was wool. Aha. Okay, so let's talk about the gloves. So I got these little gloves that are wool. They're by -33. I'd never heard about this brand, but I just saw them in a gear shop. So I got these pretty standard small wool gloves. But then they go underneath these Montbell gloves that are Gore-Tex on the outside, and then kind of they have like a fuzzy inside. And I bought these gloves in an extra large. I do have long hands, but I don't need an extra large. I only bought the extra large so that I could fit my hand with the glove into this inside of it. So it kind of acts like a glove liner, because I don't think this actual glove is meant to be an overmitt. I'm not positive, but I bought it as an overmitt. So I really liked this pair of gloves and this setup because my fingers could come out and my thumb. And sometimes I would just wear them, like either I'd wear this pair or I'd wear this pair. Because if it's raining all day, these will get soaked even though they're Gore-Tex. Another way to keep your hands warm is to just like keep them closed and then like put them close to your body, like in your armpits or like in your crotch, like in your stomach. Like just keep your fingers like as warm, like as close and tight to your body as you can. So sometimes I would wear them like just like wrapped up like this inside the glove. And so it was like this. I think this is like how the top of this glove got so frozen that freezing rain day, because I had my hand in a ball like this inside the glove. So gloves are so important. Even if it's not gonna rain, I always carry gloves. And I always also carry a beanie. So beanies are so good for keeping your head warm. This one is an outdoor research beanie, and it It's not wool, it's just like polyester, but it's so perfect. And I would like pull it over my eyes at night, so it was like an eye mask and a warm hat, except it makes my head look really shaped weird, and then I usually have my hair on the top of my head, so my hiking friends would be like, you look like a dinosaur. And you guys probably thought the same thing, because I would talk to you guys with my hair like that in this beanie all the time. So anyways, sometimes I would wear this beanie underneath my baseball cap, because this jacket, and most jackets come with like a little bill to disperse the water off your head, and that's nice, and for the really, really ultralight people, that's enough, but it's not enough for me. Like, I want to make sure there's like a little bit more room for the rain to like, for my face to not get wet. So I also wear my yellow Patagonia hat. Oh, handy dandy hiking hat. So it's not waterproof, and it would get saturated really easily, and it'd be wet, but it would dry out. And I just liked this hat so much more than the other like lightweight ball caps that I had tried out. So this hat, and I would always wear this hat when it was raining, and then the rain jacket would go over the hat. This. And if it was really cold, the beanie would go underneath this hat, and it would be like beanie, sun hood, mid-layer hood, warm layer hood, and then the rain jacket hood. So that's why layering is like so important, because you know, there's so many options for keeping your head and body parts warm and dry. Another crucial piece of gear for hiking in the cold rain is a wool buff. It's like thicker. This is the thickness of the like normal summer buffs, right? That it's like pretty thin. It's pretty thin. This is not thick enough. Your face will freeze. In my opinion, my face would freeze. So I am so glad I took the extra weight of carrying this like thicker wool buff. It's just Smart Wool brand. I didn't do research on like if there were lighter ones or better ones. I just found this in a gear shop and I bought it because I needed one, and I started in the winter. So this might be different for you if you're going to be hiking in warm rain, but in cold rain, the buff is so nice because like, well, it's just gonna really mess up my hair, isn't it? Oh, you just wear it like this, and then you can pull it up over your ears, and then, only your eyes would be out, like this, and then just your eyes. And my face would get so cold in the wind sometimes. So this was so important for me. And in the rain, it still gets wet, and your breath even makes it wet. Like this whole area would just be wet. But it's like a warm wet, which is really gross. Yes. But it's still better to be warm and wet than like freezing and wet. So that's the buff. And then I could also wear it, you know, like as a hat if I wanted to, like, like so stylish. Okay, I could wear it like that. And I would, if my beanie got too soaked, then there were some days where I wore this as a hat, as the beanie, to cover my ears and stuff. So very important layers for cold rain. Another very important layer is the rain pants. So I brought ultralight rain pants. If I were to do it again, I would probably just bring the Gore-Tex rain pants, because these would get saturated so quickly. And if it's cold, then you're cold. I mean, it wasn't so bad till the very end, because to be honest, these got some holes in the butt. And this hole in particular right here, this one made it so that my whole back leg was just drenched. It was like there was no rain protection. it was soaked, and even more so, like I think it like funneled the water. Like it brought in more water than if I was just like in my other hiking pants. But anyways, I hiked with these and they did work well, because I didn't have that many torrential downpour days until the end. But I would layer them with my like hiking pants. So I ended up carrying hiking shorts, and then I could put the hiking pants, and these are just like men's outdoor research pants that I found in a gear shop. They're not even women's, they're all loose, and but they worked perfectly. They were great. And then I would put the rain pants over top of all of those. And these are very small, so like they would be really tight over those 2 layers. And so I do have like these Gore-Tex rain pants by REI that I would probably bring instead of these if I were to do the trail again, or next time I go out in the heavy rain. Okay, so as far as shoes go, I hiked in Gore-Tex high top Ultras the entire trail except for the last 100 miles when I switched to low top non-waterproof Ultra Trail runners. I liked that method. It worked really well for me. I will always hike in Gore-Tex if it's gonna be cold, because my feet get very, very cold. And I've crossed too many frozen rivers in tiny ass trail shoes where my feet had 0 warmth retention. And it was so hard. It was so terribly cold, like in the High Sierra, crossing the rivers in my tiny, 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 very thin, minimalistic, New Balance Minimus trail shoes that I hiked in through the snowy Sierra, which was like my own mistake, but my feet froze so bad. And so on the Appalachian Trail, I chose Gore-Tex, and I'm so happy about it. If I was having to cross more rivers where I was guaranteed to be saturated all the time, I might not be so Gore-Tex devoted, because like once you saturate them, like fully submerge the boots, the high tops, then they are very heavy and they don't dry out. So that's like very much the downside. But on the Appalachian Trail, there's so many bridges that, and like even in the torrential downpouring rain, I still found that my feet stayed dry like most of the day, and they wouldn't fully saturate as long as my rain pants were on the outside of the heel cup. So I almost switched to like non-waterproof trail runners. Actually, the day the freezing rain hit, I had just gotten new trail runners because I switched out my Gore-Tex boots, and I was like, oh yeah, like it's warming up. Check the weather. Now, I knew that the weather was going to be bad, but like I thought that I was kind of heading into warmer weather, like after this like cold front passed, and that I was going to be fine in non-waterproof shoes. But then no, it was way too early still for that to be a good decision for me. So I wore them like that one day, and then I sent them home. And then I continued on with the Gore-Tex high tops all the way until the 100-mile wilderness, or like right before the 100-mile wilderness, because that's when you have to do a bunch of river crossings. Okay, so you also want to make sure your entire gear stays dry, like in your pack. So I carried most of the trail. Half the trail. I carried the Hyperlight Unbound 40. Before that, I carried the Z-Packs Arc Scout. Both incredibly great options. I loved both of them. This one is way more waterproof because my other one was very, very old, like 4,000 miles old. And this one, really, really waterproof. They have like the seams on the outside so that it's more waterproof, but it's still good to have waterproofing on the inside and I think on the outside too. So I had a Polycro like pack liner, but it was really, really crunchy. And then I ended up ditching that, I think when I switched to this pack, but if I could do it again, I would keep that pack liner or just use a trash bag. I used trash bags like on the PCT, like most of my hiking, I just use trash bags. As like, you put all your gear inside the trash bag and the trash bag inside your backpack. But in addition to the bag being waterproof, the liner on the inside, I also think it's really important to have a pack cover on the outside, because a lot of times you have stuff on the in the external pockets, and you don't want to have to be like shuffling when it's raining to get all the stuff on the external pockets inside. It's just kind of a hassle. So, and my my external pack cover was slightly too small when my pack was full. So that was like one of my mistakes, especially going into the 100-mile wilderness. Like that first day, I might have talked about it. Like my pack was full because we had 5 days of food, and the way I was carrying my sleeping pad, which is a foam mat, the pack liner or the pack cover was too small. So with that being said, in the middle of that day, I remember getting nervous that the bottom of my pack was gonna get saturated and that like my sleeping bag might get wet, because I didn't have a pack liner on the inside. All I had was the pack cover. And so what I did was I moved my sleeping bag and my warm like layers that I sleep in to the middle of my pack, and I moved my food to the very bottom, because the bottom is often the place that gets saturated the fastest. Sorry about the crunching noises above me. I live in a basement apartment. A few more gear pieces I want to touch on that I find really important and helpful in the rain that you might not have thought of, that I didn't think of, is like an extra like bandana that stays dry, that you will use to dry things off once you're in the shelter or in your tent. So my foam mat would get wet, and I would just use a dry bandana to dry it off at night. And then I could also use this to like wipe down my tarp, like for condensation that got inside, or even like the outside, like having a dry bandana. And I would just use a quarter piece, and I would bring like 3 or 4 of these. So that way they could be used for different things, but I don't need a full bandana for that. So the other thing is pajamas. So a lot of people just like to hike and sleep in the same outfit, and that's fine, except if you're going to be hiking in the rain, then you're gonna get to the shelter or your tent and you're gonna take off all of your wet clothes. And then, unless you just wanna sleep in the nude, which is maybe fine, but also maybe not in the shelter, you're gonna need clothes to change into, and it's just way more comfortable to have like a dry long sleeve and a dry like long pants to put on, dry socks, maybe even dry gloves, depending on like how cold it is and stuff. I will say, like, if you do sleep in your hiking shirt that's like kind of damp, it will dry out, but you just don't want to risk getting your down sleeping bag, or even like, unless you have a synthetic bag, but you don't want to risk getting your sleeping bag wet from your clothes. So definitely suggest carrying like base layers for pajamas. So the tips so far are: make sure you're safe. And to do that, you want to check the weather and be aware of all the elements that are involved in your section if it's going to be raining. The next tip is to be prepared with your gear, know your gear, and have the right gear for the situation that you're going to be in, whether it's going to be hot or cold. How wet is it going to be? How likely are you going to be in a hostel or a shelter? The next tip I have is to have hope. It might sound silly, but enduring those long rainy days will be so much better if you can stay positive by holding on to hope. So what I mean is, fix your mind on the next best thing that's gonna happen. It's raining on you if it's raining on you all day, you're uncomfortable, you're way too hot, you're way too cold, You're slipping around. Oof, if there's also bugs out, ooh, that seals the deal on being the worst. But to make those things better, I always feel like I just tried my best to be hopeful. I hope that getting to the shelter goes well. I hope I get to get dry in a hostel soon. I hope my next hot meal is gonna be amazing. Just all of these really, really positive things that you will experience again, even though it feels like, it can feel like the rain and being wet is endless. So yeah, instead of replaying "this sucks" in your head as you're hiking through the rain, try "I can't wait for my hot ramen bomb." I can't wait for my next hot shower. I can't wait to be dry in the shelter or in my tent. And just let those positive feelings fill you up and give you energy to get through those long, hard days. Okay, my next tip is to hike in groups. So coming from me, it's who am I to say you should hike in groups, because I hiked solo most of the trail. Though I did hike with Coyote a lot and my friend Leffy. Those were my two hiking buddies on this very solo Appalachian Trail through hike. And let me tell you, the days that I was hiking with them and in the rain were so much better than the days I was alone hiking in the rain. First of all, it's safer to be with someone else when the conditions are rainy and not ideal. There's tons of bad things that could happen, and it's just safer to be together with other people that you trust. So also it's more fun to talk and pass the time, and it just feels way easier to stay hopeful and positive and uplifted if you're also hiking with other people. So my final tip for you is to stay in hostels as much as you can on rainy days. So the Appalachian Trail crosses so many roads, and all of those roads have phone numbers listed on your map, on the Far Out app. There are phone numbers listed for shuttle drivers. Also in the AWOL guide, or also in towns, you can find shuttle driver names for almost every single road that the Appalachian Trail crosses. Or you can or if it's busy enough, you can just hitchhike, but do that at your own discretion. But what I'm saying is that take advantage of that on those really, really wet days, because it is so nice to sleep in a bed and take off all your wet clothes and have a place to hang them up in a dry space, take a hot shower, dry off with a towel. It just is amazing. It is the best part of a rainy day is getting to stay in a hostel and dry off. So I think that I didn't even realize how often I would be able to stay in hostels. It was kind of mind-boggling to me as someone who's hiked the Pacific Crest Trail first and some of the CDT. I just did not realize how often I could stay in hostels and how many shuttle drivers there were to come pick me up, or how many road crossings there were. So it was just really, really, really surprising. And most likely, if you're coming to the end of a rainy day, you can get a ride to a hostel. So if you can afford it or you can swing it, I would say definitely try to do that on rainy days. And if not a hostel, then a shelter. Try to line it up for a shelter, because then you don't have to pack up a rainy tent. And packing up a rainy tent is just another layer of challenge, because then your bag is heavier. Then you have to take the tent out in the middle of the day for it to dry out if it's not raining the next day, or you have to set up a wet tent that night. And I feel for most Appalachian Trail through hikers, it's not possible to stay in a shelter every night because the trail is so full. So most of the time you don't get to the shelter fast enough, and the shelter is full by the time you get there. But if you hike it in the winter, the shelters are almost always empty. So that was my experience. I did not have to worry about not being able to stay in a shelter if I like was at a shelter almost the entire trail. I think it wasn't until the Northeast, like Maine, like maybe New Hampshire and Maine, where it was like, oh, I might not be able to stay in the shelter because people are starting to come southbound. There are more section hikers in those areas. And that's something I'm like really, really grateful for, because it did rain a lot at night. Like even if I didn't get that much rain during the day for quite a few 100 miles, you know, here and there, it would still be raining at night. And like the shelter would just make it so nice. Or the hostel. And then if you can't stay in a hostel, pick a good spot to put your tarp or tent. So pitching your tarp and tent in the rain, or if it's going to rain, is so much more important. Like choosing a good location is so much more important than if it's going to be rainy than if it's not, because the rain can like spill into the bottom of your tent or your tarp and saturate everything, and then you're just in a big puddle. So you don't want to put your tent or tarp somewhere that could end up becoming a puddle. I don't think I did this. I didn't stay in my tarp that often, but there were a couple thunderstorms in the middle of the night where I definitely got wet in my tent, and I was
like a little before 2 a.m. and all of a sudden it just started downpouring and I couldn't get my door closed on my tarp. Hopefully it stops.
But I don't think I had trouble with pooling, because you just like look for the ground to be a little bit raised. Like you don't want it to be, you have to just like pick somewhere that the water is gonna shed on all sides almost. And then make sure you pitch properly for rain. So whatever that looks like, I'll do like, you know, more videos about how I pitched my tarp and how I stayed dry the few times that I used it in the rain, when I wasn't able to get to a hostel or a shelter. Okay, so I think that's it for this video. If you're hiking the Appalachian Trail next year or in the coming years and you're worried about rain, don't worry, you can get through it. Just utilize these tips that I provided and test it out for yourself. See what else you want to add to this list and what you think is most important when you're dealing with the rain. And if you have any other ideas, leave them in the comments for me and for other people. Hopefully it's nice and sunny for you and you don't have to hike in the rain unless you really love it and you want to. But yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. I will catch you in the next one. Bye. There's all these like individual raindrops stuck to the branches and light shining on them. Let me show you. So pretty. Look at all these shiny little raindrops.